You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan. Well, hello there, folks, and welcome to episode 19 of the Just Japan podcast, Tattooed in Japan. My name is Kevin O'Shea. I am the host of the Just Japan podcast. I'm a Canadian living and working in Japan. And I want to thank you for taking the time to stop by and download and listen to the Just Japan podcast, a podcast that talks about many different topics, well, about Japan. So this week, I decided to talk about a topic that I honestly really don't know anything about, but it's been something that people have been asking me about for many years. And that's about getting tattooed in Japan, or what it's like to have tattoos in Japan. And when I say that it's something I really don't know about, it's because I don't personally have any tattoos. I'm not inked. As they would say in Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with that. But you know, I just don't have a tattoo personally. In the interview portion of the episode 19, Tattooed in Japan, I do talk about briefly the closest I've ever come to getting a tattoo and why I'm thankful I didn't get that particular tattoo. But so of course, not knowing anything really about tattoos in Japan and what it's like to have that experience, I contacted a friend of mine who does have a lot of experience, and we're gonna have a great interview later on in the show. So I just wanted to again thank you all for taking the time to listen to the Just Japan podcast and remind you that you can support the Just Japan podcast over on patreon.com, patreon.com/BusanKevin. All right, so check that site out. I'll put a link in the show notes, patreon.com/BusanKevin. And I mentioned the show notes, of course, the show notes for this episode 19 of the Just Japan podcast can be found on BusanKevin.com. Now remember, you can also subscribe to the show on iTunes. All you have to do is basically do a Google search. Just type in Just Japan Podcast, and you can subscribe. I know there are some people out there who don't like iTunes. For those folks out there who don't choose to use iTunes, you can of course listen to us on Stitcher.com. If you can get the free Stitcher app for your Android device or your Apple iOS device, any device, and you can listen that way. Or you can listen in the Libsyn player. The Libsyn player. Libsyn is the podcasting hosting service that I use for the Just Japan podcast, and they have embedded players for each episode, and there will be links to all of those things in the show notes under episode 19 of the Just Japan podcast, Tattooed in Japan. So I just wanted to mention something over on the Just Japan podcast Facebook page, the Busan Kevin Facebook page. I've been getting a lot of questions recently, or a lot of people just wondering, what's up, Kevin? Where's the content on YouTube? Because of course I am known as a YouTuber first, podcaster second. And it's kind of changing though. The kind of there's a bit of a sea change there, and I'm almost becoming a podcaster first and a YouTuber second. And I think for any of you who have been following me, I'm not going to talk about exactly what happened, but recently, about a month ago, there was an incident where I unfortunately had to take down my Busan Kevin, my main YouTube channel. And it's back up, not quite in the form that it once was. A lot of the videos aren't there that were there before, and you'll notice actually that the view count has dropped by several million. So there was an incident where again, I had to take down my channel for a while, and it's now up. But because of everything that happened, I've kind of lost the YouTube video creation mojo. And I'm honestly, I'm just not in a place to make videos right now. I've shot a few things, and I've uploaded them, I should say, into my editor, my video editor, and they've just been sitting there for days and days, weeks and weeks. I have a feeling that in time things will change, and there will be more regular content on the Busan Kevin channel, the Jland Kev channel, my two main YouTube channels. It's just, this happens to YouTubers from time to time. Maybe not quite exactly what happened to me, but we have periods. Other people have periods where they have lulls in production, and they come back, maybe in a different form or the same form as before, stronger than ever. But so that's the case, guys. There's nothing wrong with my channels at all. I'm also extremely busy at work. Just it's a busy time of year. But one thing that is very interesting, I'm not going to go into detail about it just because I don't know much about it. I have just secondhand knowledge. But there has been quite a bit of drama within the YouTube community, the J-Vlog community, the Japan YouTube community, in the past week or so. Some of you out there might know, if you are people who follow the J-Vlog community, a big kerfuffle between some very big YouTubers named Rachel and June, and another one called Canada Jin 13, Mira, I think your name is. So to be honest, I haven't been I'm not subscribed to either channel, so I'm not really familiar much with the kind of content that they create. That is the thing about the J-Vlog community. It is an active community. There's a lot of people involved, but it's a very fluid community, and there's some of us old dogs, folks who are long in the tooth, who've been around making videos and stuff for a long time. But it is a very fluid thing. Once I think YouTube has become a bit more mainstream in recent years, more and more people who are coming to Japan are using it as a tool to share their experiences with family, friends, and the general public out there. So every year there's a big influx of foreigners who come to Japan as exchange students, as travelers, as teachers, and other instances, other professions. And many of them do start up YouTube channels and they start vlogging, and it's very, how shall I say, it's kind of a transitory thing. A lot of people come and go, come and go, come and go. So there's a lot of J-vloggers, Japan vloggers who come, they set up a channel, they contact a lot of other people, they try to make a big splash, they make a few videos, and then they leave, or they just kind of lose interest in the content creation process, which is very natural. That happens a lot. So I have to admit that over the years, with a lot of people, and I think what it comes down to is, a lot of people are sharing their brand new experience in Japan. They're sharing like, wow, this is amazing. Look how cool this is. Look how weird the toilets are in Japan, or look how different the bathroom is, and look at the heating system I have in my house. It's so different. When you get someone like myself who's lived here for several years, you're not that interested in watching videos about that. You're not so much interested in watching videos about the things that you experience on a daily basis. So to be honest, most of the videos I do watch on YouTube have nothing to do with Japan at all. They're either, they're just travel videos, adventure videos, vloggers who live in Canada, America, other countries. They rarely have anything to do with Japan itself. And that's the main reason why I'm not subscribed to a lot of J-vloggers. So there you go. So there's big drama that's unfolding. I think if you just follow anyone like Victor, Give Me a Break Man, Give Me a Flake Man, any of the kind of Tokyo-based J-vloggers, they've been making lots of videos about it, and you can Unrested Scott, that's a guy that he's in the interview tonight. I'm going to be talking to Scott about tattoos in Japan, and he's made some videos on his YouTube channel, youtube.com/unrested, about this drama. So there you go. That's a bit of news for those of you out there who are into the YouTube J-Vlog community. If you're not, well, hey, there you go. Ignore everything I just said. And we'll get on with the interview. So again, we're going to talk about tattoos in Japan. And, the thing about tattoos in Japan, there is definitely a stigma attached to having a tattoo in Japan. Traditionally, historically, tattoos are connected with the underworld, the mafia, the Japanese mafia, the Yakuza. It's kind of a symbol of identity as a member of organized crime, to have very ornate, elaborate tattoos on your body. So often, because business owners, people were scared of the Yakuza and kind of didn't want their ilk around. Often, people who have tattoos are banned from certain places like public swimming pools, like onsens, which are hot springs, or sentos, which are kind of public baths, or health clubs, because, management owners don't want to drive business away. They don't want to scare customers by seeing scary people with tattoos. But in the interview portion, we're going to go a lot more into that with someone who knows a lot more about tattoos than I, because, again, I don't have any tattoos. My friend Scott Ackerman, was cool enough to sit down, and he's Unrested on YouTube, and talk about his experiences with tattoos in Japan. So sit back, Grab a beverage if you so choose, a snack if you want, and listen to the interview portion of the Just Japan podcast.
Please hang up and try again.
Okay, so welcome to episode 19 of the Just Japan podcast, the interview portion, where we're going to be talking about being tattooed in Japan. And this is a topic that many people have asked me about over the years. They've asked me questions. They say they live abroad, they have tattoos, and when it comes to Japan, they've heard different things. For me, when I give advice and information, it's secondhand knowledge, it's third-hand knowledge. I am not inked. I don't have a tattoo. Nothing against tattoos. I think they're great. I just don't have one. So I can't speak to the experience. I really don't know. So when people have requested this on the Just Japan podcast, I thought to myself, who better to bring on than my friend Scott, known as Unrested on YouTube. Those of you who may know who he is on YouTube, he's a big guy on YouTube. And he's well known for being inked. And he's been in Japan for quite a while. So I thought, who better to talk to you about being inked in Japan than someone who is.
Hello.
So thank you, Scott, for joining us tonight.
No problem at all.
Yeah, so I guess to begin with, and the basically what I ask every guest who comes on to the Just Japan podcast, first of all, where are you from? How long have you been in Japan? And what do you do here?
I am from America. I was born in Pennsylvania, last lived in Florida. Came to Japan first on a teaching gig with an Eikaiwa, that's English Conversation School, for those of you in the know, or not in the know, I should say. And I currently work now as an illustrator for Setsume Sho RPGs, which means manuals for role-playing games that are pen and paper, a very nerdy side hobby for some of you. And now I've been in Japan almost 8 years. Holy cow.
Oh wow, that's 8 years. I've actually I've just passed my 6th year anniversary in Japan. So, but I suppose at the end of the day, when you come to talking about the guys like Mully, who've been here for 23 years,
Yeah,
still a drop in the bucket. But wow, yeah. 8 years. 8 years, that's impressive. That's impressive, sir. So you are known as Unrested on YouTube. So of course, I don't want to get you on here without talking a little bit about your YouTube channel. Could you tell the people out there who may not know of your YouTube presence?
Sure.
Could you tell us a little bit about the Unrested channel and what it is?
Sure. I've been doing Unrested channel for 6 years, going on 6 years now, and I have 300 plus videos that answer what we call JFAQs, Japan's Frequently Asked Questions. Those concern anything and everything you could ever think to ask about living or visiting Japan, everything from different types of visas to simple things like getting a cell phone to, even things that you could just barely imagine on the fringe of questions. I've probably answered it at this point with 300 plus videos. On top of that, I've recently started up a show since back in 2013 called Osoroshi Saturday, which Osoroshi translated literally means creepy or scary, and that concerns extremely creepy tales from haunted Japan, talking about stuff that's like supernatural or urban legends, Toshiden Setsu, or Bukimi no Tanigensho, which is Japanese for the Uncanny Valley.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Now, okay, so into the meat of the topic tonight. Tattoos. So I don't have tattoos. I have no tattoo history. The closest I ever came to getting a tattoo, and I'm so glad I didn't, and it wasn't the name of a woman, but when I was in my mid-20s living in South Korea, I was really into martial arts. And I was very serious into training in Taekwondo, and I was training 5 nights a week, about 2 hours a day. And I was very serious. And I actually wanted to get in the Hangul, so Korean script on my arm, Taekwondo. And I did that for about 2 years, and then I stopped. And I'm now 38, and I have not trained one day in a dojang since I was 27. So I'm really glad that I don't have Taekwondo written on my arm right now, because people be like, what's up with that? I'm like, well, once upon a time.
I used to be a Taekwondo master, and this tattoo proves that status.
So. And now I can barely bend over and tie my own shoes. Yeah. So what I was wondering, can you maybe tell the listeners out there a little bit about your tattoo history? Maybe like when was the first time you got a tattoo, or when you
Sure.
first thought about it, and yeah, your tattoo history.
I was 18 because in the States, as most of you probably know, you have to be a legal adult or your parents need to sign a form for you, which I doubt my parents would have done. My very first tattoo was a very simple heart tattoo. It's from Grey's Anatomy, not the show, the actual book called Grey's Anatomy.
Thank
It's a
God.
yeah, right. Oh my God. But it's a diagram of the human heart, and because I went to Catholic school for 12 years of my life, instead of being labeled with ventricles, it's labeled with the seven deadly sins because I was always very interested in deadly sins, venial sins, cardinal sins, non-toca, because that's what's pounded into our brains in Catholic school. And my other tattoos concern a very well-known show now that used to be a comic I was very much into, Walking Dead. And I actually have that as my original left arm tattoo, and now I have a cover up over that, which is still zombies, but it's not really pertaining to The Walking Dead. It's just kind of like a random mix up of zombies. Some of them are actually my friends' faces turned into zombies because your friends will most likely always be your friends in life and death. So, um, on top of that, I actually have tattooed myself because I own tattoo equipment. I have both of my legs from hip till knee bone tattooed by myself.
Yeah,
And
and just I guess a bit of background for those out there who don't know, everyone out there listening, Scott is an artist. So
yeah, that is yeah.
you do have a background in art. So maybe you could also tell people a little bit about your background in art.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, yeah, my degree is literally in art. I have a master's in art. I have a big history with art. I was an art teacher in America before, unfortunately, losing that job due to state cuts, and that's what sent me over here to Japan. Following up with that, I worked my way as an English teacher until I got into the RPG biz, which I work in now. Nonetheless, on the side, I still like to work in a little bit of everything that is artistic, including tattoos. I have about 15 different tattoo machines. I've got two power sources. I've got an autoclave, which is I don't know, what would you say, sterilization machine?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I have access to that. That's very important. I think that really clearly separates people who we call scratchers, which is kind of like an underground, unclean, dirty tattoo artist, and people who are very professional with it. I clean everything.
Like a step away from like a ballpoint pen, needle, prison tat kind of guy.
Exactly. Yeah. So I always make sure to let people know that I do keep all my own sterilization equipment. And it was just, I had actually thought about going into that career here in Japan because you do not need any sort of license. You don't need bloodborne pathogen license. You don't need any kind of certificate. Yeah, you can literally like buy the machine and that's it. You're ready.
That's frightening.
It is a bit frightening. It is. I agree with you 100% because I feel people should have knowledge. That's why they need that machine that I was just talking about.
An autoclave, exactly. At least about general like kind of health and sanitation and.
Yes, please make them take some sort. Because I have seen shops in here where I'm like, this is all sorts of hepatitis C, D, B, and every other letter in the alphabet going on here. Let's stay away from this.
Wow.
And that's something you should be concerned about. The health ordinances in Japan are a little bit different. So it's something I guess we can talk about later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind. I mean, that's pretty much a synopsis of my background, and that's why I have tattooed myself. I never actually went into the career path just due to the fact that I would say, and you know, this is kind of a subjective view. This is my own Osaka subjective view. Perhaps if you lived in the countryside and tried to do this, it would be different. But you have to live more of a party lifestyle, I would say, if you want to become very successful, because you do have to hit up a lot of bars and clubs every night, passing out your card and you know, going for drinks with guys who are in that biz, and you know, it's kind of a pretty hardcore lifestyle here in Japan. And being a family guy,
that's right. You've got two young children.
I've got two young children. Don't really want to play into that lifestyle, so I opted out, and I kept all my machines, and I still practice on my own. I practice on myself. I've had 13 different people I've tattooed, and I actually have like a lot of. You might not know this, but there's synthetic skin you can buy in order to practice.
Oh, really? Oh, well, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, cool. I'm just kind of on a side note, I suppose that when you talk about that kind of lifestyle of the tattoo artist, um, before I came to Japan, one of my big kind of passions in life or a hobby up until I came to Japan was I've been a musician. I was a drummer, and I played in bands all through like high school, university, into my adult life, and even in Korea, I played in bar bands my entire time in Korea. Even like gigging up to my last few years in Korea, I was gigging 3 nights a week. But I always worked at kind of like the Eikaiwa lifestyle, and I was single, so I would teach from like 4 to 10 p.m. and then have my evenings free and no responsibility. So I'd gig in bands.
Hmm.
Now, like you, I have 2 young children. I'm a family man. I have a job where I have to wake up early in the morning and I have to come home to the
Exactly.
family. So people say, Kevin, why don't you play drums in bands anymore? I'm like, well, it's just playing in the smoky bar until 2 a.m. on a weeknight isn't an option
Well,
now.
that, and you know what I think a lot of people don't consider is because I've kind of had the same experience. I used to be really big into like death metal and hardcore and sing in a lot of those bands. Even here in Japan, I actually sung for a very small death metal band called Red North Cemetery.
Okay.
And I think one thing people don't realize the fact that we do have to use our voices quite a bit.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Your voices get blown out from all that alcohol, that smoke, that, I mean, clubs and bars and any of those places you play, I mean, they burn out your vocals, dude.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. We know that. We know that. And even just like a regular day of teaching will blow out your vocals, and then you have to do it,
Yeah, it'll burn out your
and
vocals.
then you have to do that every day, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that would be too much of a strain.
yeah. So, okay. So I'm thinking, of America, Canada, Japan in 2014, and I'm kind of thinking I'm going to go a little back. I'm going to go to ask this question. I'll backtrack a little bit to kind of like my upbringing in Canada. I'm in my late 30s now. I had friends who had tattoos. Not a lot of friends, but I had friends who had tattoos. And at one point in the 90s, the tramp stamp became a big thing, and a lot of girls I knew in university started getting those. The tattoo and the nape of the lower back thing. And
Hmm.
I guess I didn't realize how many people, young people from like North America, had tattoos until I was, teaching. I was teaching Korea, but when I moved to Busan, and in Busan, I moved there in like say 2005, 2005, six, um, and a real beach culture there, and a lot of the foreigners would hang out on the beach. And I realized, holy crap! Actually, to be honest, in my demographic, I thought of the people who were there, I was actually, I think, in the minority by not having a tattoo. I would probably, from the people that I saw who were kind of my age, just around hanging out, and not a lot of tattoos at all. I'm not talking sleeves, quarter sleeves, this or that, but I would say probably more than 50% had a tattoo. Um,
Yeah, if I'm correct, and I mean, people can always go back and correct me if I am wrong on this, but I believe with my generation, it's something like 80% have a
mhm.
tattoo.
I'd believe
Um,
it. I'd believe it. A tattoo of something. So here we are in 2014. You're an American. I'm a Canadian, and we were both living in
mhm.
Japan. A lot of people say that there's negative attitudes in Japan about tattoos. So I'm going to ask
Hmm.
you, would you agree with that? And why would you say that? Why would you say there's a negative impact, or no, sorry, a negative connotation? And I mean, of
Yeah,
course, I think, is it because people really connect it with the Japanese underworld?
I believe so. Yeah, there's still a huge stigma attached to it, and you're completely correct in saying that it is attached to kind of that underworld, that Yakuza underworld. These days, tattoos are slowly gaining popularity here, and I think what a lot of people don't understand is there is a very, very unique type of tattoos set within the Yakuza world. Those tattoos are like literally symbols and stuff to allow them entrance into sort of underground parts of their own clans, buildings, clan meetings, and stuff like that. And they like literally have to like roll up their sleeve or show something on their wrist to get into some areas. But I think rarely a Japanese person would see a gaijin, a foreigner that is, and cite them as being part of the Yakuza because, in all 100% truth, there's no such thing as a Gaijin Yakuza, unless you want to count like Zainichi, like Koreans, which are like usually half Japanese, half Korean, and then you kind of get into a gray area.
And they've probably been in Japan since the 1940s. You know,
exactly. Yeah. What I'm pretty much referring to is, I mean, I'm a white guy with tattoos. There's no such thing as a white Yakuza. Even though it would make a great movie title.
Hate to burst your bubble, guys out there who are hoping that someday you can come to Japan and join the Japanese mafia. And for those of you out there who don't know, the Yakuza is essentially the Japanese mafia. It's the Japanese equivalent of the Cosa Nostra in Italy, the Montreal Mafia in Canada. Actually, more accurately these days, what might be the Hells Angels. In Canada, anyway, the Hells Angels kind of rule Canada's underworld. It's but like you said, I mean, and when you see things on TV or on documentaries and this or that, they're very well inked. A lot of the big guys, right? They're talking like neck down to the ankles kind of thing.
Well, I would say like a little bit below the neck. They always.
Below the shirt line, right? You wouldn't know. They cover it up, right?
Yes, exactly. That's one of the main aspects of their tattoos. They believe in a certain sense of beauty in hiding the tattoo. That's considered to be an actual like artistic form, that everywhere that it's printed, it is completely hidden so that it can be a big reveal.
Okay. Wow. So what I'm thinking, like, okay, obviously, being a foreigner in Japan, you've already kind of mentioned this. You know, you're a gaijin in Japan. People are working on. They're not going to be saying, "Hey, he's a yakuza." But would you say, and this is actually going to lead me kind of into a listener question, would you say that for those who are gaijins, you know, foreigners wanting to come to Japan to be teachers or, you know, work in any industry, would you say that having tattoos could possibly have a negative effect on their professional or working life?
Yeah, 100%. Because look, even though we're not going to be Yakuza, because like you said, there's no such thing as a foreign Yakuza, the thing that is still a stigma is the fact that tattoos are tied to gang activity, to organized crime activity. And the first thing a lot of the older generation, now the newer one, I can't really put them under this blanket statement, but the older generation is going to say the only people who have tattoos, and they're not saying necessarily within their own country, they're saying worldwide, are people associated with gangs. And that's what they honestly believe it. Like, that's what they've been taught all their life. That's all they've ever known. Some people would say, you know, racist or stereotype. No, it's just kind of something that's come along with this country. It has always been that way from Edo era. So you're talking about, you know, something that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. You can't expect a nation to change overnight. So that's something that the older generation, the younger generation, obviously is going to look at your tattoos right away and say, okay, if you don't have like dragons and samurais, which not a lot of people, dragons are maybe popular, but like the actual real kanji associated with gangs, such as you and I are in Osaka, you're Kobe, the biggest gang is
the Yamaguchi-gumi.
Yeah, exactly. And no gaijin is going to have that tattooed. If they do, they're really taking a chance. None of them will actually.
I don't think anyone would tattoo them with that. Hey,
exactly. Yeah, if you went to an artist here and said, "Yeah, I want their clan symbol tattooed on me," they'd be like, "Yeah, no, thank you," because they're going to.
I don't want to have my balls cut off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because if someone found you with that, they'd say, "Who tattooed you?" Thinking no big deal, you'd probably tell them, and they'd go right back to that artist, and he'd be in trouble. So if the younger generation sees any of your tattoos, their first association is that they'll say, "Oh, style dakara," so it's because of style. That's why. And the older generation is the one that will associate it. They'll be like, well, only gang members have that. And that does follow you into your job. If you're going to take a job here in Japan, you got to realize most time you are teaching English, unless you get into some kind of company you're running yourself, or, I mean, you know, there is some few other handful of options, but for the most part, you're going to be teaching English. You're going to be teaching all different ages, some of which will be that older generation, and you will need to always have your tattoos hidden for that. Come with the professionalism in mind that a lot of these jobs involve wearing a suit. And I would think even within other countries such as America and Canada, suit level jobs do require that you hide
Oh
tattoos,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the
right?
thing. Yeah, no, no. It's very interesting. I was listening to something on Canadian public broadcasting today. They're talking about the dress codes in Canada and high schools affecting girls
Hmm.
and students, and how like a lot of girls are being sent home and penalized because, for example, their outfit is showing bra straps, or they're wearing spaghetti straps. We can see bra straps, so
Hmm.
they're saying that's um, inappropriate. And then there's a lot of arguments on both sides. But one argument that school boards say is that we're preparing you for the working world, and in the working world, you will have jobs where you have dress codes and you have to dress in a certain way, and we're preparing you for that. And then I heard this one 14-year-old girl who was interviewed, who she had been sent home because she had exposed bra straps. She was like, I just if a company told me that I had to follow a dress code, I'd just quit that job or I wouldn't work for them. And I'm thinking now, as a 38-year-old adult who has a family, that's easier said than done.
Exactly.
When you need to support yourself, you got to pay the rent, you got to pay all this, you got to pay the food bills, you got to support kids. At the end of the day, often you've got to do what the company says, and it doesn't matter if you're in
Yes.
Canada, America, or Japan. If they say we don't want to see tattoos, you
You
know,
need to follow a code.
you
I
got to
mean,
follow a code. And so, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that actually kind of really leads me into a couple of things here. Because funny thing is, ironically, the first time we ever met, Scott,
yeah, that's a
and
good
I,
story. You can go
and
ahead and
I,
tell them.
and I remember the first time we ever met. And the ironic thing is out there, guys. Scott and I were coworkers at one point many years ago, um, and yeah, so the first time I met Scott, and this is before we both knew we had an online presence before we did things online. We were into social media and stuff. Literally, we had the company we worked for, the schools. We had a summer camp, and I remember we sat beside each other on a bus, going to summer camp, and we introduced ourselves to each other. And I remember I was wearing a t-shirt, and it was bloody hot. It was probably, yeah, gosh, in the low
Like
40s,
43. Yeah,
43 with the
yeah,
Humidex. It was
yeah.
horrible. It was horrible. And you were wearing a long sleeve shirt. And I just remember you sweating buckets and drinking water. And I was just like, why is this dude wearing a long sleeve shirt? And I'd only been in Japan for a couple of months. So I was a newbie. I was pretty green. And I'm like, dude, like, why are you wearing a long sleeve shirt? And I remember you kind of rolled it up a bit and you showed me, and I was like, oh. And then you explained to me actually a bit about tattoos in Japan. So it was like, okay. Um, so yeah, so folks out there, so actually Scott and I have a great connection where we knew each other pre the social media stuff. Well, we were both doing it, but we didn't know. But
Exactly. Yeah.
that kind of leads me into a great question that was brought to me by a fan of you,
Hmm.
and he's also a fan of the stuff I do on YouTube and the Just Japan podcast. But I'm just gonna read it. I'm just gonna read,
Sure.
and you can
Sure.
comment because I don't have a clue. Um, so he says, "Hey guys, it's Devin from Ottawa, Canada. Just like to start off by saying I love the show, and it's a two-parter. I have a question. Sorry, he says I have a quarter sleeve myself, as well as a finger tattoo and a wrist one.
Hmm.
I was wondering a few things. First, I was wondering if all onsens, which for those out there who don't know, it's like a public bath,
Hot
um,
spring.
a hot spring public bath, right?
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
hot spring. Um, I was wondering if all onsens forbid tattoo folk. What is your experience with that? Have you ever had any problems in general or stories you could share? My second question pertains to teaching. For my case, what would you recommend for my finger tattoo and wrist? Any help would much be appreciated. Scott.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me just say with the spa type thing, the onsen, you're going to be dealing with anything that is a chain spa or onsen will most likely ban you for having tattoos. I'm just going to say that outright. I've had friends who've been banned. I've never even tried to go myself because I've heard there's just no point. If you go to kind of mom and pop run ones, it's really on a basis of their own disposition and philosophy on tattoos. Most of them within city limits, such as Tokyo or Osaka or Yokohama, are going to say they don't care. And also, Okinawa in general tends to be more relaxed about just anything in Japan. So most of them are probably not going to care either. But There has been a recent story in Hokkaido where if it was a what do you call it, from New Zealand,
Oh, a Maori
yeah,
woman. Yeah,
a
yeah.
Maori
It's like
woman tried to go.
some kind of convention or world congress of people were in Japan doing some kind of a big event, right? I think,
Yeah,
and Maori woman tried to go to an onsen. Yeah.
and she was turned down. So I mean, it's really on a basis of their own personal philosophy. Now, the one thing I will say that you will always be able to get into, and I can confirm this because I've been to at least three, and they've never even blinked, is ryokan, which is Japanese style hotel. Usually always have an onsen within, and you're paying to stay the night there. They're not going to turn you away from using the onsen, because that would be like going to, I don't know, a theme park hotel and them telling you you couldn't go to the theme park. So you'd be losing like your main option of going there. Like why did you choose them in the first place for the onsen?
Yeah.
They're not going to turn you away. You're paying a lot of money to stay there, and I've never been turned away. I've been to three very ritzy, expensive ryokans with my family because they like to choose the expensive ones, and they do not bat an eyelid. They do not care.
Okay.
And it may be because I am Gaijin. They've never even taken time to try and explain it to me because they just don't even care. And I've heard from many people they've had the same experience. So ryokan, you're safe. Mom and pop, it's on their decision basis. Chain, don't even try. No point. You're going to get turned away.
And there's actually that kind of reminds me to add when it comes to not just like the onsens, but sports clubs, health clubs. A lot of the big like the big ones, the big health clubs, like the big gyms in Japan, like Konami Sports Club, this or that. They have that policy. You have to sign the contract saying you don't have a tattoo.
And they will ban you even for very small tattoos.
Yeah.
I've known of quite a few people getting banned just for like quarter-sized tattoos on their shoulder or something like that.
Yeah, like nothing at all, huh? Even like a little thing on your ankle.
Yeah. Now, once again, I have gone to gyms that are mom and pop, and they did not care. Especially if you go to a place that's like a really hardcore weightlifting gym where they're
Yeah.
we are here to lift weights. Yeah, they don't care. Those guys.
No, I've just heard that from I had a former coworker who was a big Australian dude who played Australian football, and he had quite a few tattoos, and he was just a big dude, and he would complain about how like the big clubs, they were like, you can't do that. So he joined one, but he just lied, and then he would just like try to cover it all up.
Mm-hmm.
But he started going to like a hardcore powerlifting gym, and like hardcore. I saw the place, like rusty plates, metal weight plates laying on the ground, and they didn't give a crap.
Yeah.
But yeah. So Devin also had a question about him being an English teacher. If he wants to come to Japan to be an English teacher, and he's got a quarter sleeve, he's got a tattoo on his finger, he's got a tattoo on his wrist, what does he do?
Got to cover it up, bro. Look, if you're teaching adults, you're probably going to be wearing a suit. If you're wearing a suit, that would require that you look as professional as possible. Band-aids for the fingers, wristbands for your wrists, or a watch or something to cover it up. Don't be ashamed to wear that kind of stuff, even if you have to every day. If you're teaching kids, the parents don't want you showing tattoos to the kids. So even if you're not wearing a suit, you're there in a sweatsuit maybe every day, jeans and a t-shirt, you're still going to need to cover it up. I'm sorry, I know it sucks, especially in summer, like right now. And this is also something Mexican Samurai does, Tino. We wear pretty much like sports sleeves. They are like the equivalent to kind of like either like long socks or like I guess kind of like you'd see the baseball players here wear, like they're kind of like breathable material. That's
a lot of marathon runners wear those, like the marathon runners, because they wear like even in the winter they'll wear if they're racing, they'll wear a singlet and the small racing shorts to ensure speed, and they wear those like arm sleeves to keep them warm. So it is like a lightweight, breathable, technical material.
That I suggest those. Otherwise, I mean, if it's just a quarter sleeve, maybe you can wear kind of a baggy shirt and cover it up. If you stretch your arm out and a little bit shows here and there, for the most part, most employers are not going to care too much about that. They're pretty lenient. I work a side job right now teaching English, and the owner there is so lenient that we actually have a guy who has a neck tattoo, very small, just a tiny cloud, and he doesn't even care. He doesn't mind. He doesn't care that I have big giant gauges in my ear because I have like 000 size gauges in my ear. He never complains about that. And once in a while, Yeah, yeah. Well, and yeah, one other thing is like, when I stretch or reach or, sometimes move my arm in a certain way, a bit of my sleeve does come out, and that's just no problem. He knows my intention is to keep it as well hidden as possible. And if that is your intention, you're making an effort to do it. A little bit shown here and there usually can get by. But if you're at a very strict place that is right away making you sign some sort of contract that says you have no tattoos, you lie and get in, you better hide those things all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I worked last year for I'll just say I worked for a major city's board of education. And I did have some coworkers who had tattoos, and they just said it must always be covered up. So I had one coworker who always had like an armband on, kind of like that sleeve you talked about. I had another one who always had a wristband on. And then you think if you're working for like at a public school, you're gonna have to wear a shirt and tie. Um, it gets bloody hot here in the summer. You're gonna
Hell.
sweat. You're gonna sweat. And if you're just like putting a shirt and tie on, and you've got maybe a tattoo on your chest or something, once you get sweaty, that thing's gonna show up through that shirt. So you've got to keep that covered up somehow. Either like maybe you got to put a band-aid, like some kind of big patch over it or something, right?
Also, a note, you have to wear the shirt, the white shirt. Be careful when you step in front of a projector in Japan. That's one thing you may not think about, but when you step in front of a projector that's putting notes up on the board and you got a white shirt on, guess what? It's like getting a tattoo X-ray. You're gonna
Oh
show
wow,
every. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you
never
gotta. I
thought
mean,
about that.
yeah, I've had that happen to a friend or two. So they step in front
Ah.
of it and people are like, eh. You're like, whoa, sorry.
Oh
Yeah.
no, someone else, not me. Uh, okay, yeah. So and another, I guess another important thing to mention to people is, I mean, you got to remember too, if you are coming to Japan from Canada or America or another country, you don't try to impose the values of your country, the status quo of your country here in Japan. Hey, it's okay in Canada, man. Like, folk, chill out, man. They're all cool in Canada. Um,
Yeah, I mean, think about the reverse. I always tell people,
mm,
think about the reverse, okay? If Japanese people try to come to your country and enforce certain ways that they do stuff on you, you'd be like, what the hell? Like, did you make this country? Are you president here? Are you prime minister? You're
yeah,
not. So don't try to come there forcing your ways on them. You may think they're antiquated. You may think that they're, antediluvian. Too bad.
it's
Japan's
just the
probably
way it
got
is.
more, yeah, it's probably got more history than most of the countries that are Western and speak English.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
gotta take that into consideration, please. Don't make Gaijin look bad.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. If you really want to come to Japan, you really want to be here, you gotta follow the rules, right? That's
Exactly.
the way it
And
is.
your life's going to go smoother too if you do. Just assimilate as much. Keep who you are who you are. You've got your side
Mm,
hobbies, you've got your personal facts, philosophies, creed, and code. Keep that, but keep it to yourself. Okay? You can
mm.
talk about it after work, but don't bring any of that stuff to the workplace. It's all about 100% professionalism. You switch it on, you leave it on the whole time you're at work.
Yep. You show up if you're working from 9 to 5, you show up at 8:30 in the morning. Maybe you turn it on. You just work. You do well. You take pride in what you do, and then at 5 o'clock you punch out. You leave, and then you can be who you are.
Yeah, be who you are then.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. I mean, like they're not gonna. I've had incidents where I've had students outside of school see me, never gotten any kind of complaints about that. Where they're like, "Oh, they saw you at Costco with all your tattoos." They can't complain about that. They realize that's pushing it to an irrational point,
Yeah.
and they're not going to say anything to you about that. So they'll expect you to be professional. They won't expect you to be irrational.
Mm. Good point. Good point, Scott. Thank you. Okay, so would you say that tattoos are becoming more popular in Japan for regular people who are not gangsters? And my example is, for a brief period last year, I spent a few months working in the area in Osaka called Horie, which is like right downtown, the
Yes.
trendy area. I spent 4 months working in that area and would be around during the daytime. I saw a lot of men, young men, women, not even so much young. I mean, like in their 30s and 40s,
Mhm.
hip, cool looking, friggin' trendy people, man, with a lot of tattoos, and they were
Mhm.
clearly not gangster types.
Yeah.
Um, so would you say tattoos are starting to catch on?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, especially for our area down in the Amemura, Shinsaibashi, Dotonbori area, there's a little more acceptance of those becoming a style trend, more associated with style rather than gangster type stuff. It is becoming more and more popular. It's becoming more and more accepted. And that is, I would say, half of the reason is because they're starting to realize the Western version of it as it being only style.
Mm.
And also, I don't know if you know anything about this, but recently the Yakuza in general has actually its size has diminished, its popularity has diminished, and just their legitness has diminished. So they're becoming kind of a weaker force in general in Japan, and kind of a dying breed at this point. At the same time, your younger generation has new values. Uh, there's good and bad aspects of it. The fact that they are more globalized, they are more Western in their thought and ways. That's where we're starting to see tattoos become more popular.
Okay, right on, right on. So here's now this question is what inspired me to ask this question was, and I was kind of surprised by this, and I wish I had known, but I saw after the fact. But there was a very, very, very famous YouTuber came to Osaka a couple of weeks ago. I had no idea. He played here with this band. Are you familiar? Have you heard of Charles Trippy?
No, I don't think I
No.
know about him.
Okay, Charles Trippy. One of the biggest ones out of the States. He's a really cool dude. He had a channel for a long time. Him and his wife, they did everyday vlogs,
Ah,
and
okay.
then they got divorced. Or
Okay, I heard
this
about
one,
that recently,
and he,
actually.
he he plays with a band called We the Kings, who are pretty.
Oh, yes, actually, they're really popular in Sweden. I have a friend in Sweden said they play on the radio all the time.
Okay, yeah. So they actually played in Osaka 2 weeks ago. Then they played in Amimura. They played in a bar in Amimura.
Okay,
And I didn't know this until after the fact, like, because I usually watch his vlogs almost every day, but I've been kind of taking a bit of a breather from YouTube, so
okay.
I haven't been watching much lately. And then I kind of tuned in, and I'm like, what? He's in Japan? What? And he was like walking around. So this is a pretty popular kind of rock band from America.
Mhm.
These dudes are covered in tats, man, and they're just walking around the streets of Osaka wearing tank tops, and they all got like chest pieces, like big
Mm,
chest pieces, and they got full sleeves, and this guy's like, man, like people are scared of me. Like everyone's like really weird around me,
that's
and
true.
and he actually he stopped a couple of people. He's like, "Are you scared of me?" And they're like in English, a couple of like, "Yes."
Yeah,
So what I wanted to ask was, do and like actually scare people?
yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say in general, it does carry kind of a scare factor to it. I don't know if it's so much scare as kind of a toughness factor. Like, think of Hell's Angels. If you saw a Hell's Angel, would you be a bit intimidated? Probably. You
Oh,
probably would.
fuck yeah, man! I've seen a
Yeah,
few in
exactly.
Canada, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Not probably.
And so think about it from that aspect. I mean, even if, I mean, I myself am of a light build, I'm not a huge dude. Even in Japan, I mean, I'm a little bit above average height here, but I'm not overly, towering and intimidating, full of muscle. But I can clear a row of seats in a subway if I sit down because people are a little bit worried that,
Yeah.
perhaps, and once again, this ties to the fact that they think perhaps it has some sort of uh, gang connection, maybe within your own country, not necessarily within Japan. And they're worried about it from that aspect. People could say, "Oh, that's
Mm.
stereotyping," but once again, this their own history.
Mm.
If you want to point a finger, you can point a finger and blame history. That's not going to
Yeah,
really.
there's a reason why people think that way.
Yeah, it's no one's taught them to be like every gaijin with tattoos is a horrible person. They're just going by their own history, all right? That's
Yeah.
what they know. Um, you
People
know,
with tattoos tend to be linked to organized crime, and
yeah,
and and, and they're not tend to be linked to people who are maybe not law-abiding citizens.
exactly. Who don't fit into this social code that Japan kind of has every day. They might perhaps act out of it, and that's a very intimidating, scary factor for Japanese people. It's something you've just got to realize. You've got to live with it. Some people see it as a stigmatism. Personally, I see it as kind of convenient. I've got a seat to sit down on in the subway.
Nice, nice. That's awesome.
But there has been some situations. For example, if my wife is driving a car and we need to merge into a lane where there's absolutely no spaces at all, if I stick my arm out the window and signal that we want to try and merge, let me tell you, some spaces open up like right away. Like no one will like they'll be like, okay, well, let's go ahead and make some room for this tattoo arm that just pointed out the window. And I
Hmm.
didn't realize that until my wife finally mentioned it to me. She's like, you know why they're getting out of the way, right? And I'm like, well, what? And she's like, because you use that arm. And I was like,
Yeah, if it was
oh,
Kevin or if it
yeah.
was Kevin's arm going out the window, they wouldn't be moving. Just like that's hairy, but it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is certain aspects where I do see that come into play. That's up to you how you want to handle it. Once again, there's nobody, no certain person, no generation that you can point the finger at. There's only history, and it's something perhaps in 50 years we'll see it evolve its way out of Japan, but it's not going anywhere for a long time. Deal with it. If it's something you can't deal with, I don't suggest coming to Japan. There's just no way around it. It's what we call shogunai.
Yeah,
Nothing can
yeah.
be done.
Nothing can be done. That's a good piece of advice. If you really have an issue with it, maybe this isn't the place to come.
Exactly.
So if I'm in Japan and I want to get a tattoo, do you have
Hmm.
some advice?
Sure. First of all, as always, like you would in your own country, look at portfolios. Almost everybody's going to have a portfolio, a website, other people who have gone to them, talk to them, look at their art. One thing I think a lot of people never consider is check what level of inks they use. Do they use a high quality ink? If you ever see people walking around with very faded, colorless, green looking tattoos, this is due to the fact that their tattoo artist has used a cheap ink. um, Go to one that has a great reputation. Okay, you're going to end up paying a lot, which you would consider a lot compared to your own country. You're usually going to pay anywhere between double or triple what you'd probably pay in your own
Oh,
Western
really?
country.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, but it's true. Usually,
Mm.
look to expect to have to put down a what would you call it, like a space holder. Usually about 5,000 yen. You got to throw that down just to even reserve the point that you're going to come. And that is because a lot of people stand up tattoos. They actually get all brave and record a time and say when they're going to come, and they don't show up. It's very, very common in
Oh,
Japan.
really?
People
Oh,
get
okay.
they either talk themselves out of it, they get scared out of it. My friend Benny, who's a tattoo artist here, says a lot of times girlfriends talk them out of it, parents talk them out of it, wives talk them out of it,
Okay.
and this is just a common occurrence. And on top of that, look to probably check what they're using to tattoo you, because unlike Western countries where you're dealing almost, I'd say, 100% of the time with machines, we do have teibori. And tei, hand, body printing, means hand printing. You're literally tapping ink into the skin. And it's actually where the etymological source of the word tattoo comes from, because when you do tap, it goes tap, 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 tap,
The
tap,
little
tap.
hammer, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. And so there are artists still here in Japan who use teibori technique.
Hmm.
It is a more painful technique. It is a deeper skin technique, and it literally uses the explosion of the ink below the subcutaneous layer, which a lot of people don't realize. But if you go too deep with the ink, it'll literally explode out into your skin. It's not harmful in any way, but if that's not the technique the artist is using, then they seriously screw up your tattoo. I've seen it happen. It looks awful. And but
Hmm.
these artists are actually using that explosion to color. Like they pretty much overcompensate for it and make sure it fills in things perfectly. Just check which one you're going to, what technique they're using. For the most part, this day and age, it tends to be, I'd say, 70% of the time machine driven, but there still are Teibori artists. So you might want to check into that. And if it's, a little too painful, a little too scary, or a technique you're not happy with, fine, to each their own, but, check.
Cool, cool. Well, cool, awesome, great advice. Okay, well, I think it's time to wrap things up because we've been talking for a while, and it's late into the evening, sir. If people want to find you online and they want to ask you more questions about tattooing, or they want to find out more about your online presence, your YouTube channel, what you do online. How can people find you?
go ahead and check into YouTube Unrested. If you just type in the word Unrested, Unrested, I will be the first guy that comes up. It's not a very commonly used English word, even though it is an English word. I will be the first one to come up. I actually already have quite a few videos about it. Unfortunately, I do have 300, so it's hard for me to even remember what number my tattoo videos are. I have an interview with a tattoo artist here in Japan, which is I think over 40 minutes long because it's two separate 20-minute videos. I have interviews with three other gaijin who were tattooed here in Japan. And then I have a video about myself dealing with my own presence being tattooed here in Japan. So I cover it pretty well. And I also have another one with Mexican Samurai, who is also a dad like you and me and is tattooed. He's even more heavily tattooed than me. I mean, he's full sleeves on both arms. So
he's living down in Kyushu, and he's not just. I mean, he's living in Kyushu, but he's heavily tattooed. But he's also a big dude. He's a big, muscly.
Yeah.
He stands out in many ways, and as a gaijin, even without tattoos, people would notice him. I'm sure walking into a room.
Exactly, and we kind of interview each other talking about tattoos, our experiences, and what we've kind of gone through, good and bad. And those are what I would recommend that you check out. And other than that, feel free to send me any questions. I'm Unrested Channel on Facebook. You can add me there, and send me a question anytime about this stuff. I'd be happy to answer.
Awesome. All right, great. Well, thank you, Scott, for joining us on the Just Japan podcast. It's been really great to have you here. Again, like I mentioned, a lot of people are asking me about tattoos. I don't know. I don't have one. But it's been great to have you on, someone who knows a lot about it, who has tattoos, and knows a lot about the topic. So thanks.
Yeah, it was great to be on. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, again, thanks for doing this. Well, I want to thank Scott for taking the time to sit down and do this, to tell you guys and share with you guys his experiences with tattoos in Japan. And I want to thank you for listening. And just a reminder that you can subscribe to the Just Japan podcast in iTunes and on Stitcher Radio. I also want to remind you guys, if you are subscribed in iTunes or Stitcher, or both, at the same time, please leave a rating on the podcast, Just Japan Podcast. So, give it a rating. The highest possible rating would be the best. And of course, leave a review, guys. Leave a review. That helps. Helps kind of cement the cred of the show, the credibility of the show, and get more people maybe noticing it. And that also, my weekly call to action, everyone. Spread the word about the Just Japan podcast. If you like this podcast, if you like hearing about Japan, you like the different interviews I do here on the Just Japan podcast, please, retweet it. When I tweet it out, of course, my Twitter is at JLandKev. You follow me on Twitter, JLandKev. If I tweet out the new episodes are out, right? I tweet things about the back catalog. Please retweet those or share them. Yourself, if you have an active Twitter account, please, tweet out when new episodes drop. Share on your Facebook. That's a great way. If you're interested in Japan, just, paste the link on your Facebook page, your Google Plus, or whatever it may be. So just spread the word. I always appreciate that. The Just Japan podcast grows bigger and bigger every week. And that always makes me very happy. And remember, you can always contact me at busankevin@gmail.com, busankevin@gmail.com. You can find me, like I mentioned, on Twitter, at JLandKev. Come join the Facebook community, the Just Japan Podcast Facebook community. The link for that is in the show notes at busankevin.com. Go check out busankevin.com. That is my YouTube presence. And that's my YouTube handle. Go check that out, and of course, all the pertinent information will be there for you to have a gander at. So there we go. Another thing I just want to mention too, of course, several years ago, I wrote a book about teaching in Korea and Japan. I was a teacher in Korea for more than 5 years, and now I work in Japan. So it is an ebook. It was published a few years ago. And it is a book that is designed for people who are not in Korea, who are not in Japan, who don't have experience in either country, but you are interested in coming abroad to teach. There's maybe some useful anecdotal information in there for you. It's mostly anecdotal information, stories, that kind of thing. So it's called Teaching in Asia, Tales in the Real Deal. Teaching in Asia, Tales from the Real Deal. It's available for sale on Amazon.com, Amazon.jp. There'll be a link in the show notes for that as well. So take a look. And so there we go. Episode number 19 of the Just Japan podcast, Tattooed in Japan. I had a lot of fun sitting down talking to Scott. I definitely learned a few things this week in the interview, which is one of the things I really love about doing the Just Japan podcast, that you learn things and I learn things. And it's great. So again, thank you for listening. And I hope you're doing well wherever you are. I hope you're safe, happy, and healthy. And remember, we'll be right back here next week. So take care and be well.